So we're on our new Zoom account, right?
Yep.
Sweet. Very fancy.
I know. I have so much power. Okay, I'm gonna start admitting people. Welcome everyone, thanks for joining us. We're gonna wait a couple minutes for people to join and then we'll get started.
Hi there.
Just a reminder to mute yourselves for those of you in the audience. Please feel free to type questions in the chat while the presentation is going on, and then we might have some chance to unmute to ask questions afterwards. So, but keep yourself muted now.
If you're just joining in, thanks for being here tonight. We're going to wait a few minutes for people to get situated and then we'll get started. Just remember to keep yourself muted, and during the presentation, if you have questions, you can go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll do our best to answer them in real time. Hi everyone, thanks for joining. We're just going to wait a couple more minutes here. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to our third webinar of our series. This is on Alpine rock, and it'll be presented by Corvallis Mountain Rescue Unit member Tyler DeBoot. He's a skilled climber, and he's going to share some pretty amazing photos and details on peaks of Mount Washington and Three Finger Jack. But before we get to that, we have a few entities here who are going to kind of describe themselves. My name is Dan. I'm with Corvallis Mountain Rescue Unit. I'm our current president. And we just wanted to let everybody know that we're currently looking for members between now and November 1st. If you're an experienced climber, we would like you to reach out to our large membership. And I'm going to make sure it kind of describes what we do.
recreational climbers and backcountry skiers when their best day outdoors turns into their worst day. Objective and subjective dangers present in wilderness recreation are often unpredictable and can make an outing go suddenly bad, even for experienced people. Wilderness rescue work involves assessing and managing the risk while locating and accessing the person in need of help. It draws on rescuers' knowledge and skills to stabilize the person's condition, physically, medically, and mentally. And finally, wilderness rescuers apply the proper equipment and techniques to safely transport the person out of the wilderness.
CMRU is formed from a group of willing individuals with a passion for community service and helping others. The membership uses skills learned from their hobbies, including skiing, climbing, and surviving in extreme conditions as tools to rescue those in need. The team trains hard together and develops a trust relationship like none other. CMRU members trust their lives and those they rescue in the skills of its membership, the training it undergoes, and the equipment it uses. Successful CMRU members are those who commit to training, commit to the team, and commit to rescuing those in need with little recognition besides a simple thank you, often while drenched in the rain at a trailhead. But knowing that they just responded, used their skills, relied on the team, and helped someone having the worst day of their life.
Corvallis is the community I grew up in. It has given me a lot. In returning to Corvallis as an adult, I wanted to become civically engaged and give back to my community. Not in a more conventional way, but a way that fit with my passions and skill set. Additionally, I was looking for a community of competent and safety-minded climbers to climb with. I was looking to continue growing and learning as a climber. I found all this and more in CMRU.
Hey, Dan, the sound cut out. Should we just post a video to the YouTube channel? You're on mute if you're trying to talk too.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Sorry about the laggy video, everyone. We're sharing an internet with low bandwidth. So I'll post a link to our introduction video in the chat. It's a great video if you all want to take the time to check it out. It describes a lot about what CMRU does. And at the end, there's a way you can get in touch with us. Heather posted in the chat if you're interested in joining and you're an experienced climber, then email us at membership@cmru.org. And we'll turn it over to Sam Kong with Corvallis Climbers of Color, just to talk a little bit about her group.
Hey everyone, really glad to see folks here tonight. As I mentioned, I'm Sam. I use she, they pronouns. I'm the founder of Corvallis Climbers of Color, and we are an organization rooted in creating community and access within climbing and the outdoors for BIPOC here in Corvallis and the PNW. So our main focus is, increasing access to climbing by reducing the social and cost entrance barriers that a lot of folks face, because let's be real, they exist. And so kind of the goal of, our iconic kind of BIPOC climb nights that we host 2 times a month at Valley Rock Gym are hopefully comfortable spaces and places where folks can gather, connect, learn, and climb in. And so if you're interested in supporting us or following us, please follow us on Instagram at Corvallis Climbers of Color if you feel so inclined. If you do identify as BIPOC, please come to our climb nights. They are every second Wednesday, we have a BIPOC climb meetup at 7 p.m. And every 4th Wednesday, we close the gym at 7 p.m. To create a BIPOC affinity space And in fact, our next BIPOC Climb Night is next Wednesday, September 22nd. So I hope to see some of y'all there. And for those also in the group who don't identify as BIPOC, please help spread the word to friends and folks in the community. So yeah, really excited for tonight's webinar. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out or email us at Corvallis Climbers of Color at gmail.com. So, and I will pass it off to Peak Sports.
Hey everybody, this is Kyla and Jason. We both work at Peak Sports. A little bit about Peak. If you, well, most of us, we were going to have our 50th anniversary this year. We're going to have a block party, which is now just celebrating the 50th all year, and we will postpone some gathering festivities for another time. But we are right downtown on 2nd Street. We do have several locations that specialize in different things. So you can come and visit us primarily for the purposes of this gathering at the outdoor store. And we have a growing climbing selection now with the arrival of Valley Rock Gym, which we're super excited about. So if you're looking to find things to support your endeavors that tie into CMRU and the Valley Rock Gym and other things related to the outdoors, you can come and visit us anytime, 7 days a week. We're open primarily 11 to 6 right now and 12 to 5 on Sundays. We do have a growing climbing shoe selection, chalk bags, liquid chalk, regular chalk, powder chalk, harnesses, most of the staples, and we're listening for feedback to see where we should go with our direction for growing that selection. Come and join us anytime. Check out our social media. We have Peak Sports Corvallis. We also have a used gear store called the Annex, as well as a bike shop for those that are multi-sport enthusiasts. So we hope to see you soon. Thanks for having us on. And I'm going to pass it off to, if I can get a reminder.
I'll take it, Kyla.
From Morgan. Hi, Morgan.
Hey, everybody. I'm Morgan. I'm the Director of Operations and one of the owners for the Valley Rock Gym. We're so excited you all have joined us for our 3rd webinar and hope to see you again down the road. Valley Rock Gym is built on the pillars of climbing community, wellness, and education. We are a full-service climbing gym with climbing, yoga, and fitness facilities and over 8,000 square feet of bouldering terrain. We are currently enrolling for our youth climbing team, and we'll be hosting informational sessions with our climbing coach on Monday the 22nd, Monday the 20th, Wednesday the 22nd, Tuesday the 28th, and Thursday the 30th at 6 p.m. Come on down to the Valley Rock Gym if you're interested in learning about climbing team options, what competitive climbing looks like, and how to get your child involved. And climbing team practices will start on October 4th. More information can be found at valleyrockgym.com/youth climbing team. We are also enrolling for our adult climbing club in coordination with Goodstone Climbing out of Eugene. The adult climbing club focuses on exploring movement, strength, energy system development, tactic, and mental performance as they relate to climbing. Participants will set goals, and with the help of the coach and your other participants, will work over a 3-month season to achieve those goals. More information can be found at goodstoneclimbing.com/group. And thank you all for coming.
Thanks, Morgan. I'm going to quickly plug the Corvallis Ski Swap. So I'm Heather. I use she, her pronouns. I'm with CMRU. We are going to have our 53rd annual Corvallis Ski Swap this year. We had to skip last year due to COVID. We're going to have your masks on, come to the ski swap at the fairgrounds. I'm going to post some information in the chat. So we do consignment. So if you have stuff you want to sell, outdoor gear, ski gear, you can come on Thursday, October 14th. This is all October dates. And do your consignment swap. So we'll take your consignment items and sell them to swap. And then the sale days start Friday, that Friday of October the 15th. And Saturday, the 16th of October, and then if you pick up some of your consignment stuff and the money you got for consignment stuff, that's Sunday. So visit corvallisskiswap.org for more. You can buy VIP tickets to get in there early so you can get all the good stuff. So it's lots of different ski gear from different vendors, new gear, used gear. There's also some random outdoor gear that people bring as well and consign. So we're really excited to be back this year. So come support the 53rd Ski Swap. We've been doing this for a long time, so we're excited to be back this year. And I think I'll throw it to Tyler because we got everybody do their announcements, right? So take it away.
That's good. Thanks, Heather. Welcome, everyone. Let me spend just a second here getting this shared. Let's see. Go full screen here. And people see that? The thumbs up, Heather. I can see you. Perfect. Cool. So welcome, everybody. My name is Tyler, and I'm with CMRU. And today, like Dan said, this is our third webinar with Valley Rock Jam, Corvallis Climbers of Color, and Peak Sports. And hopefully these will be moving to in-person at some point, but we're still doing them online, likely happening down at the Valley Rock Gym in one of their little conference rooms. But today, I think I got the title matched to what was posted online, Alpine Rock, Mount Washington, and Three Finger Jack. And I want to start with a disclaimer here. We're not a guide service. None of us are, none of the affiliated members. I'm not a guide. So we're not going to tell you like, this is the gear you need to take. These are the shoes you need to take. This is the food you need to take. This is where you place protection. It's more of some resources for tips on how to plan your climbs and some potential problems that we see happen on a fairly regular basis on these two particular mountains from the mountain rescue perspective. So why this seminar? Dan was going to show a video, so I was going to blow through this, but CMRU, what we are and why you should care is we're an all volunteer group. We're on call 24/7 and we do technical rock, snow, and ice rescue. I don't know the exact date of this photo, but I think it's from the 60s. We've been around in some sort of affiliation since the late 40s, early 50s. We're part of the founding members of the Mountain Rescue Association, which is the governing body for mountain rescue work in the US. Our primary response area, you may be thinking Corvallis doesn't really have a lot of mountains. Terrain around here is actually really steep, particularly in the Coast Range. But thinking about alpine terrain, our primary area is kind of Mount Jefferson, Three Finger Jack, and Mount Washington. I decided to just kind of stick with Three Finger Jack and Mount Washington to this because Mount Jefferson holds a little bit of other challenges that oftentimes include snow travel or glacier travel to get to the summit. So future seminars, we'll talk more about kind of the multi-sports, multi-travel, so snow, rock, and kind of how to prepare for that. So there's Corvallis on the left, and then there's kind of the terrain. So Marion County and Linn County kind of split Mount Jefferson on the west side, and drawing a blank on, I think it's Jefferson County on the east side, and Three Finger Jack and Mount Washington and Linn County. So we work with other counties to make rescues happen out there. So here we are just showing a few photos of what we do. We work with dummies a lot. This is at the Lebanon Sim Lab where we can get feedback from dummies, and they can change pulse, heart rate, things like that. These are the subjects we want to work with, not necessarily live people. But here are some photos of what we actually do. This is a search up on a glacier in some nasty weather and doing some technical rock rescue practice. And that's not a subject in there. We have a rescue dummy that we use for practice. So about me, why am I doing this? Do I have the credentials to do this? If you ask me, probably not. But I've been with CMRU for 9 years. I'm a rescue level member. Really, my kind of cup of tea is playing in the snow and eating snacks. So yeah, I'm stuffing my face with some gummy worms. Been here on a route on Mount Washington, probably thinking about snacks as well. That's why I'm happy. So first you may be asking, what exactly is alpine climbing? This isn't always kind of the progression people go to, but with the advent of climbing gyms, you may start with indoor climbing at a gym. So this is a photo from Valley Rock Gym's website, their bouldering area. Your next step, or maybe even where you start, might be something what people call to as cragging or outdoor sport or trad climbing. Morgan did a great presentation at our last webinar on a few local ones of the Garden and Flagstone. But kind of the go-to for kind of cragging in Oregon is Smith Rock. Well, there may be some routes that have definitely an alpine feel. Let's get to talking about what actual alpine climbing is. So alpine climbing, I was trying to find an actual definition of it, but what I was finding online was really it's climbing above tree line. So it can really range very broadly, but oftentimes, at least the way I look at it, you are climbing with a really large pack off trail to get to where you want to go. Sometimes asking yourself, why am I traversing across this nasty scree slope above a waterfall? It may also be high up on the mountain, a place like Smith. Oftentimes you can follow chalk holds on the way up or bolt lines on the way up. Most Alpine routes don't have any bolts. That's not exclusive, but most of the time you're doing trad climbing, where you're placing rock protection. You maybe ask yourself, where do I go? Am I in the right spot? Is this the right crack I want to go up? So first I want to talk a little bit about climbing ratings. So I'll start with class, where class 1 is like hiking on the trail. Think like Misery Ridge Trail or hiking around Smith Rock. Class 2 might be a little more difficult off trail, might be putting your hands down. Class 3 is kind of where scrambling occurs or unroped climbing. Things get a little steeper when accidents happen or fall happens. You might be seriously hurt. Class 4 is where you're climbing with some exposure. Sometimes you'll use a rope on class 4 and sometimes you won't, just because the consequence of the fall can be fatal. And class 5 is where technical climbing starts, and it's uses what's known as the Yosemite Decimal System, or YDS, when you're looking at routes. Currently, right, you might see when you're looking at some routes online, like 5.0, 5.1 is kind of where most people start technical climbing in Alpine. But if you think about sport or cragging, usually kind of the lowest rating's 5.7, goes all the way up to 5.15, 5.16. Who knows? People are progressing like crazy. But if one interesting thing I want you to keep in mind about this is the current ratings of a 5.7 was a 5.3 in 1960. A lot of routes in Oregon were put up in between 1920 and 1970s. So a 5.9 in 1960 could be as hard as a 5.12 because numbers above 5.9 had not been invented yet before 1960. So the last thing, when you're looking at particularly some Alpine routes, this goes for rock and snow routes, you might see a grade as well, where grade 1 is usually you're spending less than half a day on a technical portion, all the way up to grade 7, where you're doing like big wall climbing and you're spending multiple days, if not weeks, on a particular route. So something like, throwing this out there, Mount Rainier might be a grade 5, or something like South Sister is probably a grade 1. Last thing is protection rating. You may see this when you're looking up routes as well. Like, what does a 5.5G stand for, 5.7 PG13, or 5.12X? It's about how good you can place protection. So a lot of times PG13 is kind of pushing protection. So a good friend once told me, he's like, you don't want to either pushing your rating, your climbing rating. So if you're a 5.5 climber, you don't want to be pushing your climbing and also push your protection. So you're going up to a 5.7 and it's rated an R and X, he's like, don't even think about it. So R's are runouts, so really big falls can happen, and X is basically no protection. So, all right, now that's out of the way, we have an idea of what Alpine climbing is. Let's talk about Santium Pass Alpine rock climbs. And where exactly is Santium Pass? So from Valley Rock Gym to Santium Pass, it's interesting, Google kind of pulled you off there at the Hoodoo ski area, is about 2 hours, depending upon which route you go, whether the roads are good or not. About 2 hours up to the location. In the mountains up there of Santium Pass, kind of our primary backyard playground for Alpine climbing is Three Finger Jack and Mount Washington. And each sits on, Three Finger Jack's on the north side of the mountain or the pass, and Mount Washington's on the south side of the pass. So one fun fact, I'll talk a little bit about getting into these particular places, but Santium Pass is one of the few places in the world where 2 years are located. And might not be that impressive, but you can impress your friends when you're walking down. So Hog Rock and Hayrick Butte on Santium Pass are 2 examples. And they're flat top mountains that formed when a volcano erupts under a thick sheet of glacial ice. I pulled this from somebody's technical article. So you see from A through D, you kind of get this lava formation that never really breaks out of the top of the thick glacial sheet. And it forms these steep sides and really flat tops. So here's a photo taken from Mount Washington, kind of looking back at Santium Pass. And so you see Hayrick Butte kind of in the center of the photo, real flat top. Hog Rock's kind of hard to see here, but it's on the other side of the pass. Other locations in the world that you can find these are British Columbia, Iceland, and Russia. So it's kind of a really cool, unique feature you can impress your friends with, particularly if they're interested in geology. So here's Hayrick Butte, taken from Hoodoo Ski Area, real flat top and some steep sides. And then Hog Rock's kind of down in the foreground. That's Highway 20 going over Santium Pass. All right, so where do you even start? Like what I refer to as I have no idea what I'm doing or what I'm getting myself into. So this is really kind of the crux of what I want to talk about. I'm not going to provide a whole lot of detail about specific routes or route conditions or what gear you should take, but how do I prepare myself to have an enjoyable and safe climb? So the first thing and the main thing is to make sure you have a good plan. So first thing is understand your skill set. Make sure you get the right gear. Practice with your gear. Make sure you know how to use it. Get in the right mindset. And what I mean by that is a lot of times people will say, oh my goodness, September 23rd is the only day I have on my calendar to climb Mount Washington. I have to do it regardless of whatever it is. You might not be happy with going on work or family. You might be feeling a little sick, right? Just make sure that you're not kind of taking unnecessary risks just because you're not in the right mindset. And then get the weather forecasts. Weather's supposed to turn this weekend, chance of snow at the mountains on Santium Pass this weekend. So if you're planning to go, make sure you're prepared for it. And lastly, make sure you let someone know your plan, how long you're going to be gone, where you're going to go, and kind of what time they can expect you to come back. So some resources for planning I wanted to talk about is some route information, weather, and mapping. Like, where do you actually get that information? A few years ago, probably a decade ago, finding some route information was a little challenging, but there's a lot of really good resources out there right now that you can almost get like up to the date information on route conditions. So normally when I start with books. I keep two with me. These aren't this exclusive to Alpine rock climbing, but the Best Climbs Cascade Volcano series is pretty good. They cover the volcanoes from southern Canada to down to, I think, Mount Lassen's in there. So it's pretty broad, but really great photos, kind of aerial views of what you're getting yourself into. So here's kind of the page on Three Finger Jack. So it gives you information on how to go up and down, kind of to get actually up high on the mountain. And kind of that photo down on the bottom right there is kind of the crux of the climb of getting through and up to the summit. We'll talk about that here in just a little bit. The other book I oftentimes refer to is called Oregon High. It's only exclusive for Oregon Mountains. It was written or published in 1990. It's no longer published. If you ever get your hands on this, it's particularly at a reasonable price, definitely pick one up. It's pretty good. There's some great stories of first ascents in there of what people were doing like in the 50s and 60s that probably have never been repeated. And similar to the Cascade Volcanoes book, right? It's going to give you multiple routes for the same mountain, where the Cascade Volcanoes book will only give you a handful. So like the Cascade Volcanoes for Mount Washington gives one route, I believe, maybe a couple, where the Oregon High book gives 20 different routes up Mount Washington of different difficulties and different risks to take it. So other places, if you don't have any books and you're like, I just want to look online, some good resources out there is mountainproject.com. This is not exclusive to alpine climbing either. A lot of really good information on sport climbing. You can search by just a region. So you can start at Oregon and then kind of break it down into the Willamette Valley if you're looking for something in the valley or Santiam Pass or on the east side. Summitpost.org is another really good resource. Often it doesn't seem to get updated as much as it used to, particularly in terms of trip reports, but it's a good resource to kind of figure out where you're going, what other people have done. CascadeClimbers.com, it's an online forum. Most of the particular discussions that at least happened probably in the last 5 years is more of a snow and ice climbing as opposed to rock climbing, particularly alpine rock climbing. But they have a good catalog of old trip reports, going back to early 2000s of people climbing to give you some information about routes and what people are carrying for gear and kind of duration of how long a climb might take. Another good resource for finding route information, and this is probably the best for finding up-to-date route information, is social media. I do want to give a little bit of a cautionary tale about this. Is particularly if you're a beginner, you oftentimes will be talking to people who have a lot of experience. People have different risk tolerances. So when you're talking with people, social media and maybe even on an online forum, just take what the information you're giving you with a little bit of grain of salt and figure out where you are in your comfort level with dealing with routes and climbs. So two that I'm going to show that I'm part of that is kind of given really good information is the Pacific Northwest Mountaineers. Again, not Oregon specific, but a lot of times routes on Oregon get posted on there. And then an Oregon specific one is Oregon Hikers and Climbers. Not always climbing, right? Hikers and climbers in there, but a lot of good information coming out on climbing routes, a lot of good photos, particularly like what conditions look like. So what do I use for weather forecasting? We go round and around within our unit of the best way to predict weather. Everybody has their own opinion, but the two I'd usually use is the National Weather Service, so weather.gov. You can type in a GPS coordinate, or you can type in a location. So like if I wanted the weather for Three Finger Jack, I could type in Three Finger Jack, Oregon into the search box on the top left. It'll give me a point forecast. And then you can get all sorts of things like hourly forecasts and tabular forecasts and graph forecasts to see what weather you might expect. Another good one is mountainforecast.com. Again, it's not every mountain, but all of the high peaks in Oregon, you can do a point forecast. I didn't look before what the forecast for this weekend is between these two, but when storms come in, there's oftentimes a lot of discrepancy that happens between these two forecasts. So as you gain more experience, you'll be like, okay, I think with what's going on, I'm going to trust weather.gov or mountain forecast. If you're like me, you take the more optimistic one and oftentimes get let down with what the weather is actually like. So I want to talk a little bit about mapping, making sure you don't get lost, right? Everybody or most people are now carrying smartphones that have GPS apps on them, which are really useful until your battery dies. And usually when people get in trouble, their battery percentage is somewhere between 1% and 4%. So you can't rely on your phone exclusively. I'm gonna hopefully let one of the folks from Peak chime in here. I think they still carry the geographics maps. I was looking online, but I could not find anybody that was carrying them. These ones are great. This is the Mount Jefferson Wilderness one, which is where Three Finger Jack is at. And it gives you a lot of good detail of kind of how to get in there and where the trail actually runs, where you might peel off for climbing routes, and some of the terrain you might experience. We'll give a plug. We did a rescue in 2017, and we were hiking in, and we were like, the PCT does not seem right. Like, I feel like we're hiking off trail, but we didn't miss it. If you're ever on the PCT, it's like a highway. On the way out the next morning, we were talking to forest rangers, and like, oh yeah, how do you like our new reroute of the PCT? And like, that's why it looked different. So we're hiking through grass instead of on the dirt trail. But now, so like if you GPS track it, it's not going to line up with like a scan topo or not. Because of the reroute. My second go-to, and this is the one I usually use predominantly, is CalTopo. I'm going to give a big plug for it. It's a fantastic resource. It's free. You can also get a pro version where you get a lot more layers and a lot more features. If you see down there where it says parcel data and parentheses pro, if you have a pro subscription, you can see like who owns what land, which is really interesting. And you get a few more layers like current live satellites and a weekly high-res satellite. So the way this website works is you type in caltopo.com. You can enter coordinates or location name in the search box up at the top. So I searched for Three Finger Jack, and they have several different layers. Their default one is kind of their own, which is called Map Builder Topo. Shows trails, contours, some features. But if I change my base layer, it gives me all sorts of different ones. So this one might be something people are a little more familiar with. This is the USGS scan topo of the area. It looks a little different. I can look at the Forest Service maps. I can add things like slope angle shading. So if you're interested in how steep am I getting into? So if you look around the summit, it's dark purple. So somewhere between 46 and 59 degrees. So it gets really steep up there. maybe even six. It gets steep enough to be vertical up at the summit, and I'll show you that here in just a little bit. But other things you can add are markers, lines, all sorts of things in there. The marker and the line are the two that I predominantly use. And what do I mean by that? I can put in waypoints. So I can put in a trailhead location. I can put in where I want to break off of the trail, where I'm going to tie into the ridge, and I can actually GPS map this onto a trail that is on whatever layer I'm working on. I can then I finish it up, I can take a look, what am I getting myself into? Do I really feel like I'm up to doing 12.5 miles and 3,200 feet of elevation gain this weekend? Maybe I am, maybe I'm not, but it gives you a good indication of what you're getting yourself into. You can then save these. The green square, I can't remember what my next slide is. So you can also change layers. It saves all of your markers and lines that you put in there. You can save it, you can download the app, you can open it, and then if you have cell service, your track can be live tracked, which is really neat. As long as you have cell service, it'll update your map with where you're at. So if you're sharing this map with your friends, if you're in cell service, they can actually see where you're at. So that's what I have for preparing. I'm gonna talk just a little bit. I know I said I wasn't gonna tell you what to bring for gear, but I did put a little section in here of what should I bring, but also known as, do I have the right stuff? If I'm going alpine rock climbing, do I need to bring skis? Maybe, maybe not. Do I need to bring ice tools? Maybe, maybe not. Really depends upon what the conditions you're getting yourself into. Oftentimes when I'm hiking in, I'm like, did I bring the right things? Like, did I pack my rock shoes if I'm going rock climbing? So the first thing, Morgan and I talked to see if we can get this to work, and I may even stop my screen just to show this, is the one thing I always bring is the emergency kit. And my emergency kit does change depending upon the season I'm going out and what the forecast is going to be. But there are a few things that I always carry with me. One is a first aid kit. I keep a pretty small one. It's got some medicine, like an irrigation syringe, a knife, some bandages. It's pretty small, just so I think you might be able to see. I got an Nalgene here, so it's smaller than my Nalgene. I also take emergency shelter, usually one of two. So I got like this little Survive Outdoor Longer emergency bivvy. They make ones that are a little nicer than this, that might make it a little bit more enjoyable. But this thing's super tiny and weighs basically nothing. Peak Sports carries these. I think they carry the other options too, but this thing's really small. Depending if the weather is going to be a little bit nastier, I might take something like a Sil Nylon ultralight one-person tent. So this thing is also really small. Gives me a few more options, particularly if we need to spend the night out and get a couple people under some shelter. This is a lot more expensive than this. With a knife, you can make this with this and probably make this last all night. And the last emergency kit, particularly for climbing, anytime I use a rope, I take an emergency rescue kit. So this is where you need to know how to use your gear. So I got a couple pulleys and some cordelettes that if somebody needs to go up or down on a rope, whether it's myself or somebody else, I can make that work with just this little bit of gear. It gives me a peace of mind. I'm pretty prone to spraining my ankle, it turns out. So this could happen on a route where I need to do some rappelling or I need to go down and I can't control myself. So, or somebody else I'm climbing with, that I can actually help somebody get up or down, whether I know them or not, based on just a little bit of gear. So for alpine rock climbing, right, there's no bolts. You may come across some old pitons. These are routes that put up a long time ago. And so you may be able to clip into them if you can find them, but take those with a grain of salt on how old those are, whether they're good or not. So all sorts of options for rock protection. Kind of the most common one you might see is a cam or hex nuts. What else is out there? Tri-cams, sorry, regular nuts or hexes, all sorts of options out there. Climbing in alpine terrain, there's really no particular rules, right? Other than be safe and make sure what you're getting yourself into, you're comfortable with. Those are the only two rules. So if you need to sling across a rock with some webbing or running a belay with your rope over some rocks, it's all fair game. So I just mentioned, bring a rope, always bring a helmet. I'll talk a little bit about some hazards you might expect on these particular routes. And the big one consistently is rockfall. So bringing a helmet will be beneficial. And my 10 essentials. So do I have extra clothing? No, for the forecast for this weekend, I'm going to take some extra clothes, some rain gear. It was going to be the end of June when it was 100 degrees. I might just take a really light extra pair of clothes just in case. I also, in my emergency kit, I forgot. This kind of goes in my 10 essentials. I like to insulate myself from the ground. So I take these little small sit pads. Thermarest makes them. Peak also carries something like this. Really small, really light. Don't notice when I'm carrying it. I also have a small insulate pad. I can't remember where I got this from, but it was dirt cheap, like $5 for a 2x8 piece of it. So if this disappears, I don't really care for whatever reason. But my 10 essentials, so light, so I don't get stuck in the dark. First aid kit, way to start a fire if I need to, which I've got to rethink that one given the current fire situation over the past several years. So as I transition into what can I expect, right? So for the particular gear I'm carrying, it's really indicative of where I'm going in the terrain. So like, what can you expect on an alpine climb in Oregon? And like this photo says, it's just like Yosemite, right? Not really. So those rocks are not as secure as anything you'd find in California. Oregon's a little different than most places that you climb. You're coming from Colorado, Wyoming, Washington, California. Everybody refers to everything here is choss or really loose. And for the most part, that's true. But there are ways you can manage the terrain. So big one, loose rock. So this photo here, you can see it's basically like a bunch of stacked plates. It's really loose terrain. It's sometimes you look at the features and you're like, I have no idea how this is standing. If you read some of the trip reports, in Oregon High, they also mentioned things like, I have no idea how this is standing. And that was from 1930 or 1940. So you'll come across a lot of exposure when you're alpine climbing. You're starting high off the ground or starting on the ground and climbing a lot higher. So if exposure is your thing or is not your thing, definitely start slow, do some sport climbing to make sure you're only 30 feet off the ground, you're comfortable with that before you get 2,000 or 3,000 feet above the ground. Weather, get the forecast so you don't get stuck like Todd here, trying to get out of a situation when the weather rolled in on us. You might come across poor protection, right? You might be, not that I would strongly encourage this, but you might be needing to place some mental protection and like, well, I guess I'm going to sling this dead tree to see whether or not I can actually get through this spot that I'm in. Nightfall. Always a bummer. Things get a lot scarier when it gets dark out because you don't really have a good frame of reference other than the 10, 15 feet that your headlamp can see. So plan ahead for potentially being out at nightfall. Right, we're in the Cascades. It's potentially supposed to snow up on Three Finger Jack. Here's a photo that Dan took on June, probably 15th of 2020, where it was basically full on winter on Three Finger Jack. Boots, crampons, ice axes, just to get up on the ridge where no more than a week before that, everything was completely melted out. So with snow and ice on routes, depending upon when you go up there, you may come across moats where you're trying to figure out how to get off of a snow slope, whether it's steep or not, doesn't really matter, but it might be 10 or 15 feet down bedrock before you can actually get onto the climb that you want to do. So if you're going early season, make sure those last two, snow and ice and moats, are really important to be considering. And the last thing is navigation. Oftentimes you're going off trail to get up onto a peak, right? It's not like the super highway of the PCT to get where you're going, but make sure you know how to navigate both with paper maps and with your GPS, whether it's a dedicated unit or a cell phone GPS app. Cool, so let's actually talk about the mountains that I've been alluding to for a while. So Three Finger Jack is just north of Santium Pass, located in the Mount Jefferson Wilderness. And with the new current wilderness permit system, day trips out to Three Finger Jack and Mount Washington are unlimited day use. You just fill out the permit at the trailhead. Overnight trips, you need to have limited entry for both the Mount Jefferson and Mount Washington wildernesses. So you'll see probably in one of these that it's 7,844 feet is what I'm claiming. I was actually flipping through books and maps, and depending upon what map you're looking at or what book you're looking at, these elevations range by plus or minus 50 to 100 feet. So it's about 7,800 feet. Not crazy tall, but it's pretty tall for the state. So straight line distance, it's about 4 miles north of Santium Pass from Highway 20. But it's about 6 miles via the PCT to get wandering through the trees and through the burn to get up to the summit. So it's a heavily eroded shield volcano. Just throwing a little knowledge here. So the last eruption they think was about 100,000 years ago, which is a long time ago. I guess that's why it's as gnarly looking as it is. So the first ascent of Three Finger Jack happened in 1923. If you're interested in Oregon climbing history, there's the Boys from Bend is the group that did a lot of first ascents throughout Oregon. There's some great stories about what they were doing. I think it was Three Finger Jack when they got on the summit. The guy did a handstand, and one of the guys did a handstand, and his climbing partners thought that he was going to peel off. And I'll show you what the summit looks like here in just a little bit, and you'll see how scary that potentially is. So when I go out climbing, like I said, I oftentimes use resources, whether it's the first time I've gone or the 10th time I've gone. I oftentimes like to see whether or not things have changed. So on Mountain Project, if you click on the particular route, so I'm going to talk about the South Ridge route here. You see it's trad 52 PG13. So you think it's pretty straightforward and pretty easy, but think again, like this first was climbed in 1923. And I'm not entirely certain, and I don't know how you could figure this out, if that is the original rating from 1923 or the 60s, or if that's the most current rating for difficulty. And if somebody has that information, I'd actually really like to know that. But on these pages, people can comment like, let's see, I was out climbing up in Washington the end of July, and the route we were climbing, somebody had posted from early in the year that one of the bolts was missing. Really good information, right? You may see some of the things like the west face of Mount Washington, the route's no longer there. It's not the original route. The first pitch completely fell off the mountain. So you'll see these kind of updated things of changing conditions, particularly really drastic ones. There's also a lot of photos and a lot of information on what you can and can't expect for a particular mountain. So here is the route going up Three Finger Jack. This is the South Ridge. This is taken, if you look at a GPS map, there's a high point just south of Three Finger Jack that you can actually see up the mountain. I do apologize for the really squiggly line. That's as best I can do, trying to draw in Microsoft Paint with a touchpad on a laptop. So you don't have to jump to get onto the summit. That's just my drawing skills. So you kind of work your way off the PCT up to the trees and then gain the ridge and go up to the summit. So 52 PG13. I did want to throw in some estimated times. This is kind of what ballpark. I'm not a super athlete. I'm definitely kind of the lower tier in terms of athletic prowess. I'm putting a big range in here. Some people can go super fast. Some people can go, like me, a lot slower. But kind of ballpark, if you're going to go out, about 8 to 12 hours to get to the summit and back down to your car. If you're going later season, you may be running into dark as you're hiking out, so definitely prepare for that. So some of the hazards, like I talked earlier, loose rock, you're going to see this a lot. Loose rock, loose rock, loose rock, rock fall, lots of exposure, potential weather issues, and nightfall, among many things that you may experience. So like I said, Mountain Project has a lot of good information. There's photos that people have drawn as you're peeling off the PCT on the Climbers Trail, or even if you're on the PCT going past the west face, you notice this really big nasty scar kind of coming down from the summit of Three Finger Jack on the west face. Definitely do not go up that. It is like mid-calf deep sand. It's awful. So, use the information that you get from websites like this. The Climbers Trail kind of wanders through the trees. It's also more pleasant to come down. And real easy to tie into. So go back to your mapping skills and what you're preparing for your maps. You can, if you get caught in the dark, you can put a GPS point of, this is where I need to start going down off the ridge, or this is when I'm gonna tie back into the trail. So you can think, oh, it's daylight, it's fine, I'll be able to find it out, figure out where I need to go. But you can also get stuck in the dark. So really want to talk about for these particular mountains and these routes are problem areas that we've seen as a rescue group on these mountains. So here is kind of that photo I showed from the Cascade Volcanoes Best Climbs book. We were just up there in July, mid-July, I think it was. And I wanted to really kind of capture the problem areas so we can talk about them. So here we see on the left, Lindsay and Jake getting ready to kind of get up into the crawl area that you'll read about a lot on this particular climb. So sorry about that. Here's the route, kind of wanders kind of through this rock. It really looks kind of formidable when you're up there, but the route definitely goes through there. So just to the right of Jake with the red backpack, there's a step down. And think about climbing with a backpack on. And you go to step down, face out, that you can catch your backpack on a rock and it can pitch you forward. So you go around and then you get on this flat spot and then there's a second step down right before the crawl. Most people read about the crawl as kind of being this formidable thing, but there's potential problems that can happen even before you get to the crawl. After you get through the crawl, there is always surprises me. I've been up there several times. There's a short vertical wall and you're like, how the heck do I get through this dang thing? Again, think about on your way up, particularly on your way down with your pack, how it can potentially pitch you off to the side. Then you kind of work your way up this little ramp on the right into the saddle and climb the chimney to the summit. So just so I'm not proven that I'm not lying about this step down, so this is a little more zoomed in as Jake is working his way through this, where Lindsay's belaying him. So the step down's about as tall as Jake is, so probably 5-6 feet. And then you kind of see where the other step down is. There's Dave sitting there. And again, that one is probably a little harder to get through. It's a little more technical climbing to got a little step down, but it also is a step down of probably equal height, maybe just a little higher. And then photo of the crawl. And the reason I really wanted to show this, so I pointed out, going back to this original photo here, it's about 700 vertical feet from where the crawl is until you hit the scree slope. So it's not perfectly vertical. So it's a really nasty fall if you're gonna go off the west side. And the east side is just as high. So even a little higher till you probably hit the scree. So these are definitely the points to be like, am I mentally prepared and am I physically prepared? I'm out huffing and puffing to get up here. Can I get through this safely? So here's Heather climbing up through the crawl. This is the tail end of the crawl, and this is what the exposure looks like. That's about 1,300 feet down to the scree slope. So long ways, and it's really steep and really, for lack of a better term, pinball-y, right? You bounce off a lot of things before you hit that scree slope. So once you get through that, here's the chimney. It's a really interesting feature. It basically looks like stacked mud with some knobs sticking out, which is not a far cry from what it actually is. Then up at the top, you see the yellow sling where the rock totally changes. The geology of the rock completely changes, which is really kind of interesting. So here's the summit. Like I said, there's an article, a little story about the first ascent party where one of the members did a handstand on the summit. It was really tiny. Like you could fit probably 4 somewhat comfortably up there. So it's real small if you're on a busy day. I would recommend waiting your turn instead of trying to crowd a bunch of people up there. So here's Landon. Now what do we do? All right, we're on the summit. And Todd responds, we go down. It's the only decent thing to do. I like to throw in really silly jokes occasionally. So how do you actually get off this thing? You basically completely reverse the route that you're going to do. So first step is to rappel off the summit. Here is James. You see Heather kind of standing down at the base of the chimney, coming off the summit. So exposure is tremendous up there. So definitely make sure that you are safe and secured to the mountain before you really make any movements. So you don't end up slipping off the summit. So as you work your way back through, you kind of start reversing the routes. You may think after you get through the crawl, smooth sailing, but So here's Dan standing on kind of the plateau right before the summit where the step downs were. And just past that, working your way down, this is kind of what the route looks like. I did my best to estimate where the route is, but it's steep. A fall would be nasty as well. So just once you're through the crawl, keep in mind that you're not done until you really get back to the PCT, and then you can kind of take your hyperfocal glasses off and kind of cruise back to the car. So Mount Washington is on the south side. I probably got about 20-25 minutes left. So for those that are wondering how long this might take. So it's in the Mount Washington Wilderness. It's about 7,800 feet as well. It's about 6 miles straight from the Santium Pass highway to the summit, the way the crow flies. It's about 5 miles via the PCT because you can drive down to Big Lake on your way down there. It's interesting to hear that there's a debate on what type it is, and maybe multiple types of volcanoes, but hard to tell because it's so eroded. And the last eruption was 250,000 years ago. So the stories from the boys from Bend that this was the most impossible mountain to climb, but they were able to climb it at the end of 1923, kind of the last of the Cascade volcanoes to be climbed. So again, with Mountain Project, I'm only going to talk about 3 routes. I know it said Oregon High, there's 20 routes that they talk about. I'm only going to talk about the 3 that are listed on Mountain Project. Similar to Three Finger Jack, a lot of really good information and photos about these 3 routes. So going back to the view from Santium Pass, the North Ridge route kind of follows this red line up the prominent ridge that you see from the highway. Southeast Spur follows this green line. Again, you don't really elevate to get it through that. Bad map drawing. And the West Ridge is this purple line that follows the Skyline Right Ridge. So North Ridge, it's rated as 5.3. Similar travel time, 8 to 10 hours to do this route. And again, exactly the same hazards: loose rock, rockfall, exposure, weather, nightfall, all of the things I talked about earlier. So here's a view from the west side, kind of looking at the route up. So you kind of get through the trees and traverse across some of this rocky formation to get up to the technical climbing point. So before you start climbing, there's a pretty exposed traverse, and similar to Three Finger Jack, kind of on that last photo of the descent I showed, it's exposed and it's steep. And then you kind of climb into this notch, and then that's when you start the technical climbing. So what does that exposed traverse look like? So the bottom photo on the left is Heather and Damon climbing through, getting their way to the exposed, or to the start of the climb. And the photo on the right, this little "Where's Waldo?" Where's the climber on this traverse? So I circled them in red. So it's big terrain, even though the elevation is not all that big. So once you start climbing, this is kind of what the terrain you're getting yourself into. So this is the top of the first pitch, kind of large blocky boulders, quite a bit of exposure. And this is kind of climbing up to the summit, kind of up the last pitch. So similar consequence of a fall. It's about 1,000 feet down to the scree slope on both sides. So definitely make sure you're traveling safely. Before I start talking about how to come down, I want to talk about the other routes, the ascent routes of these. So the southeast spur of Mount Washington was first climbed in 1959. The red line in the photo is basically the route you take to get to the summit. It's rated 5.6. Again, I'm not entirely sure if that's current or 1959 rating. And this one's a little longer because you kind of have to circumnavigate almost the entire mountain. You have to get onto the complete south side all the way around the mountain. So I would estimate 12 to 18 hours, 12 if you're competent, 18 if you're less competent and slow like me. Where now you're thinking about, am I traveling in the dark or am I traveling out in the dark? This one also is several pitches of climbing, depending upon how long your rope is, where you can find anchors and safe places to belay from. It might be 7 to 10 pitches of climbing. And similar loose rock, rockfall. And I also wanted to put in route finding. So coming off of Mount Washington in the dark or in the dark can pose some significant delays to your trip based on experience. So I just circled this little bit here on the right in the photo. So that's that loose rock that I showed earlier. And basically that whole stacked pile is holding up the east face of Mount Washington. So it's been a while since I've been over there, so I don't know if it's changed, but I would not be shocked to see that looking significantly different. So just a few things from Mountain Project, right? There's photos of where you should start and information. They kind of broke it into 4 parts of fun, easy climbing, and then there's some third class climbing, and really kind of think about some of the key things they say. So I highlighted up the top, scary 5-5 rock tree climb. Like, what the heck is a rock tree climb? It was a mantle off of a dead branch to get onto the head wall. So it's pretty wild. Some of the stuff you may have to do alpine climbing. So last thing, be forewarned, with bad luck and errors and route finding, it's quite possible to only experience loose rock. That is very, very certain. So if you're climbing and you're reading this report and it's like, sounds like this should be fun, and all you're experiencing is really bad things, you're probably off route. I've messed up my animations here, but there's also photos of some other photos that I oftentimes will take screenshots on my phone, pull them out, and see what those particular key components that I think when I'm pre-planning my trip that I should be taking. So here's the Southeast Spur. This was done in late June for when I climbed it. So there was some snow, but it kind of follows this predominant kind of whitish ridge going up. I was not joking about using dead trees as anchors. So this was not necessarily for fall protection. It was more for reducing rope drag, but the climbing was easy, and it was something that Joe, my climbing partner on this trip, had decided we needed to do to reduce rope drag. So once he got to the harder climbing, that he would not be fighting rope drag. So exposure is tremendous on this one. It's pretty spectacular setting, particularly when there's snow. So here's Joe. I think this was the head wall pitch. You can't quite see the dead tree in this photo. The awkward maneuver had to come off of. And then the last route I want to talk about is the West Ridge of Mount Washington. It's first climbed in 1947. It's rated 5.8. Again, about 12 to 18 hours. It's more challenging climbing. It's about 7 to 9 pitches of climbing, and similar loose rock, everything I've talked about already. So this is a better photo. So this was a screenshot taken from my phone of kind of figuring out, where do I start at? Where's the North Ridge? What's the West Ridge? Kind of other things, key features. So I just wanted to show this photo of some route finding challenges. So this is looking up at the West Ridge, kind of from the west face scree slope. Where the heck do you start at? Even though I had a screenshot, it was challenging to figure out where to start at and what particular kind of gully that we needed to climb to get on the route proper. So it's impressive terrain, really challenging terrain, but also really fun terrain. Similar to the Southeast Spur, right? You're kind of up on this rock ridge for the entire climb. Really spectacular scenery and a spectacular location to climb in. So let's talk a little bit about how to get off. Here's Todd. Like, this isn't where I parked my car. I want to go home, but I got to get off this mountain first. So going back to a view of the North Ridge route that I showed earlier, the descent route, I'm going to talk about 2 particular options on the way down. The red line is basically reversing the complete North Ridge route. In the other option, the blue line, you kind of go down the west face on the scree slope first, and then you kind of traverse out and end up kind of in the bowl on the whole west side. There's certain pros and cons of each side, and I'll talk about those in just a second. So this is a great photo Dan took of Damon on their climb last year of Mount Washington. When you're going out climbing, particularly on these 2 particular peaks, you're going to find a lot of webbing and a lot of rappel stations. Check your anchor. This applies for 3-finger jack. Check your anchor, check your anchor, check your anchor. A lot of the accidents that we see for rescues occur on the descent as opposed to the ascent. So people are tired, they're not necessarily thinking right, maybe they're dehydrated, they're hungry, they got bad weather, whatever. So check the webbing. If it's not your webbing, check it. If you don't like it, add some new webbing. Check the rock, right? This is just slung around a rock. It's amazing how much the big rocks move up there. So you may be like, that's big, it's not going to go anywhere. You barely lean on it, it goes crashing down the side of the mountain. check to make sure your rappel set up right. Check to make sure your gear set up right. Rappelling is not necessarily the most difficult task you'll do, but don't discount the consequences of setting up incorrectly. So just showing the exposure, this is rappelling down to the top of the first pitch here. Tremendous exposure. If you're going to end up falling here, you'll fall off onto the east side, which is way more gnarly than the west side. Neither is going to be a pleasant experience for any party involved in this, but the west side is nearly impossible, or the east side is nearly impossible to get up to. So there's the top of the first pitch as Todd's rappelling down here to get there. So go back to this photo I showed earlier of these two descent routes. So the red is the North Ridge route, blue is that west face route. The challenge with the red route going down the north face is definitely have a GPS track as you're kind of peeling off the PCT to start climbing up there. It's amazing how ill-defined a trail is in the dark. And the Southeast Spur trip I was on, Joe and I wandered around in the trees on the North Ridge route for probably 2 hours trying to figure out where the heck we were and tried how to get back to the PCT. The blue route is a little more direct, a little less hard to get lost on. But the challenge with the blue route is that west face funnels all of the rockfall from the pinnacle. Many of the accidents that happen on Mount Washington that we respond to, or somebody gets hit by a rock on that west face. So here's Colin after a climb talking about how rocks basically, you ever watch The Price is Right? This is how the rocks bounce down the mountain. So it's like Plinko, and hopefully you're not the 10,000 mark on the mountain when the rocks come bouncing down. So think about I guess my takeaway on this, and kind of the point I want to drive home is, if somebody's climbing above you, I would recommend going down the North Ridge. If nobody's climbing above you, either option is fine. Because everything that comes off of the North Ridge route or west routes comes funneling down this west face. So some resources to get started in alpine climbing I want to talk about. So you might be interested, hopefully this inspires you to get out climbing, maybe inspires you to do some SAR work, or whatever, like hopefully this inspires you. So some local resources for climbing. OSU offers some climbing and mountaineering courses, particularly if you're a student, an employee. I think they're open to the general public. Valley Rock Gym, fantastic opportunity to connect with fellow climbers, to get talking with them, kind of figuring out, meeting some people you're interested in with shared interests. Corvallis Climbers of Color, like Sam was saying earlier, this is an opportunity to connect with BIPOC members. Fantastic resource to get out connecting with fellow climbers, whatever your interest is. And social media, and I'm going to give you the caveat again of social media is be cautious with the advice you get on social media, and process that information into your own comfort levels. A little more regional, there's climbing organizations, the Shemekadins and the Santium Alpine Club out of Salem, Mazamas out of Portland. There are other groups. If you're interested in women-specific groups, She Jumps is a great resource to connect with like-minded women climbers. And then the Inspiring Girls Expeditions is spearheaded by a professor here at OSU. And they're predominantly more like in the high school age. So if you have kids that are interested in getting out and climbing, the Inspiring Girls Expeditions is a fantastic resource. And if you just Google it, website will come and tell you all about it. More national and even a little more regional too, American Alpine Institute, Timberline Mountain Guides, et cetera, can help you develop your skills. So as I wrap this up just a little bit, I'm going to do a little teaser here because I'm going to segue into a little bit of SAR stuff. Practice before you go. Be physically and mentally prepared. Know how to use your gear correctly and safely. Know how to rappel. Work on your multi-pitch climbing skills. Be like Dan here in this photo. Look good, have fun, and be safe. So if you were on the last one, Todd gave a great presentation of kind of SAR resources. I want to recap this and talk a little bit about some of the experiences we've had through mountain rescue on these particular mountains. So what should you do if something goes wrong? So what is SAR? What is search and rescue, and why should you care? So we're the ones that oftentimes will get called out to help you get yourself into a good place. a resource for when things go bad, and we're trained organizations. We aren't the only ones in the state. There are 5 mountain rescue teams in the states and multiple local government search and rescues. So we help find lost subjects, that's the search part, and extract them, and that's the rescue part of search and rescue. So why should you care about us? So as an outdoor user, whether you're a recreationalist, a guide, SAR volunteer, whatever, anybody outside of the urban area, you may need to use your skills for an extended duration while we show up. And I want to drive this home. SAR operations are free for those being rescued. So don't be like, oh crap, I can't afford a SAR extraction. It's free. So what happens when 911 is called? What happens when an emergency happens? It goes to a dispatcher in the county where it was placed. It's passed on to different agencies until resources are activated. So we have missions, we're activated on missions when something happens, and we refer to people that are injured as subjects. So I'm gonna talk about that. We don't use subject as derogatory, but as kind of a blanket term for anybody that needs help. So the Oregon Emergency Management is used for activating resources from the county. And then before I start talking about particular mission type stuff, the sheriff is ultimately accountable for the SAR operations within their county. Three Finger Jack and Mount Washington are in Linn County. So when we go out, we're working for the Linn County Sheriff. So the sheriff, and often does, delegate authority to their SAR coordinator or somebody from one of the teams that's going out to respond. So nearly all of us that do SAR are volunteers. There are paid positions within each county, but that ranges between like 1 and maybe 3 people in the county are actually paid SAR personnel. So we oftentimes get resources, help from other counties and the military. All right, so let's do a little scenario here in the last 5 minutes. You and your friend are planning to climb the west ridge of Mount Washington. There it is in all its glory. You read about it on Mountain Projects. Somebody made the comment, this is the Grand Teton of the Central Cascades of Oregon. You're super excited about climbing it. You're 6 miles in. You come across a 2-person climbing party, one's injured with a broken leg, lots of contusions and lots of confusions. You check your cell phone, you have no service. What do? So let's just throw this on a map on Topo. Where are you? You're about 6 miles from the trailhead. I don't remember exactly where cell service happens around Mount Washington. Let's just say you have 4 miles to go to hit cell service. So a little timeline of what this might look like. So you needed to you're a good person, you go check out this person. It takes about an hour to figure out what the heck's going on, see if they really need help. You hike/run to find cell phone service. Fast, maybe you can make it in an hour. If you're a little slower, maybe you can make it in 2 hours. 911 calls sheriff. Sheriff figures out what's going on, takes an hour. Sheriff calls us, team notification for departure and planning, anywhere from 1 to 3 hours. Just kind of a shooting from the hip. Usually it's about an hour that we get. We're all volunteers. I work at the university, so it takes me some time to get home, get my stuff together. So some SAR planning stuff we do to help reduce the amount of time it takes us to get rolling is we pre-plan mission maps. There's our Mount Washington map that has all sorts of things, different trailheads, trail junctions, climbers trails, spots where climb should start, hoist locations if we involve helicopters, places that might be able to land. So we spend a lot of time kind of building these maps to help us. So if we go back to our timeline, it takes 2 hours to drive there. 3 to 5 hours to hike in. You may be like, why the heck does it take you 3 to 5 hours to hike in? It only takes me 2 hours to get out of there. So a lot of times we carry really large packs. These 3 look like more like backpacks with legs than people, and it's often off trail. From wintertime, we take even more gear. We are expected to be out for 72 hours at a time. So it oftentimes involves a lot of gear to get to where we're going. So maybe we need other resources, other teams, maybe the National Guard to come help us out. So another 2 hours for them to show up. So I should have done a total summation, but if we can get there in 8 hours from when an incident happens, that's actually really fast. So when accidents happen, that's why I have the emergency kits and ways to make myself comfortable if something bad happens while I'm out recreating. So just a few photos of some awkward large pack type stuff that we carry. So this is the Linn County Search and Rescue Team, the cadre. Here they are carrying in a litter for help with an extraction off a subject off the west side of Mount Washington, and a litter wheel. Here's one of our members looking like a turtle, carrying half of a litter on his back. And just like a turtle, he doesn't want to end up on his back, or he's going for a long slide. This is on the west side of Three Finger Jack. Nightfall happens. Here we are getting into a mission on Three Finger Jack, just about to enter the crawl. So like the photo I showed in the daytime, this looks a lot different in the dark. Other photos of us working in the dark. So unfortunately, accidents still happen at 6 in the morning. They oftentimes happen at 6 at night before we get that information. So we are oftentimes working in the dark. Thinking about protection, the dark can oftentimes lead to really maybe unpleasant surprises for us, where we are not, I wouldn't say really sticking our neck out, but sticking our neck out to help, where we have bad anchors that get revealed in the daytime. And when things get really bad, we oftentimes rely on the National Guard. So here's the Mount Washington, where we're doing extraction, helping with the National Guard to get a subject out. So what's the best prevention to not have something happen, right? You can plan all you want, but something might happen. And for me, my best prevention methods is know your comfort level. The mountain's not going anywhere. Like I said earlier, you may be like, September 23rd is my day, but it might not be your day. So be okay and comfortable with turning around. So you don't really want to see us in this situation where we got all of our ropes out and doing technical rope rescue. Hopefully you see us more when we're having fun, carrying members around the parking lots and joking around. We oftentimes are out recreating. So if you see us with our little blue and orange emblem, feel free to say hi, chat with us. We're always happy to chat with you. And that's it. That's all I have. I just want to say thank you to everyone, and thank you to the hosts of this particular webinar. So I'm Tyler. If you have any questions, you can email me here. If you're interested in joining, I think Dan was saying at the beginning, our membership at cmru.org, we're actively recruiting through November 1st. We got to recertify ourselves with the Mountain Rescue Association in the spring. We'll be a little busy and won't be able to actively recruit at that time. Valley Rock Gym, here's their address, downtown Corvallis. Great place to connect with people. Corvallis Climbers of Color, I was looking on their Instagram page the other day, and Sam can chime in here about some events they're having. I saw a cleanup event and maybe some introduction to climbing at Smith Rock. So check their website or their Instagram page for opportunities if you're interested in climbing and peak sports. Like Kyla said, they're celebrating 50 years. Let's support them so they can celebrate 50 more years. And there are their addresses to their 3 stores that she talked about. So that's all I got. There's a lot of chat information. Hopefully I was items that you couldn't hear me, but happy to answer questions. I'm going to pass this back to Dan here, if I can. You there, Dan?
Thanks, Tyler. That was really, really great presentation, full of a lot of information. We were able to answer some of the questions in the chat here, but if anyone wants to come off mute and ask us some questions, now is your opportunity.
I had a question. I was wondering how people are trained to be in the mountain rescue.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for asking. It depends on the type of team you work with, you volunteer with. There's a variety of different teams. Here in Benton County, we have Mary's Peak Search and Rescue. We also have the Benton County Aries Radio Club, and we also have the Canine Search and Rescue Group. And with Corvallis Mountain Rescue, or the technical rope rescue team, there's quite a bit of training involved. We expect everyone who seeks interest in volunteering with our team to be experienced climbers with some level of professional training. And then you go through Search and Rescue Academy, which is a statewide academy that's many weeks and involves a lot of hours of volunteer work and lectures and skill sessions. We also require a medical certification. Typically, it's a wilderness first responder or outdoor emergency care certification, which you can look at getting through NOLS or wilderness medicine or any other agency. And we also require avalanche training. And that would be ARI 1 through the National Avalanche Association. And there's lots of other training as well. It's quite involved just for being a volunteer on a team like that, like ours. Hopefully we answered your question okay. Is it Malaya?
Malaya.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, I think that you answered my question. You're basically saying that there are different like divisions, and then in your division, there's a variety of different like things that a person would be trained on.
Yes, exactly. We're all under the county of the Benton County Sheriff, excuse me, we're all under the umbrella of the Benton County Sheriff's Office, and within the Sheriff's Office, there are multiple search and rescue teams. Thanks, Malaya. Does anyone have any other questions?
Yeah, how you doing? This is Andrew. Thanks for that presentation. You mentioned Topo and some other resources for like pre-mission planning. Curious what tools you use for navigation while you're underway. Like I use like Gaia GPS and Garmin InReach and Onyx and that sort of stuff. Do you have anything you recommend that you use for navigation while you're kind of out there?
Yeah, that's a good question, Andrew. There's a variety of preferences within our team. I prefer Gaia GPS. I've also used Onyx and the Topo app. We, as a team, have a Topo Enterprises account that we use for missions and preparations and trainings. You can hear my daughter in the background. Tyler, if you want to add any answers to that question.
Yeah, I think you nailed all of them. I'm a big fan of Gaia. That's usually my go-to when I'm out recreating. Like I was talking about with Topo, that's the app version. So there's a caltopo.com website and a sartopo.com website. They look exactly the same. I honestly can't tell you exactly what the difference is, but the app is Topo. And we oftentimes use it more for missions. So our search and rescue base can keep track of where we are. So I think this works on the regular CalTopo page and kind of general login that you'd get, that if you are hiking out, test this out, don't quote me on this, test this out before you really need it. You can share the link of the website or your map that you create with a friend, and they can live track you as you're hiking around. So with the Topo membership that we have, while we're out on missions, we have several teams out in different locations. You can pull up the map. If you have cell service, you can see exactly where everybody is and exactly where everybody has been. So that one's really, really cool. It's gotten better over the last year, and I can only imagine it's going to get better. It's basically some guy's hobby down in Southern California who has developed that entire website and kind of this app for GPS tracking.
And you said you have an enterprise account for that Topo app, you're saying?
Yeah, that's correct. But I think just the regular accounts, you should test it out. It's free to sign up. You can check out whether or not you can track your friends wherever they are, as long as the app is actively recording a GPS track and somebody has access to the map that you have saved. If that makes sense.
Okay, cool. And what about EPIRBs and beacons? Do you guys use InReach, or do you have a preference for emergency
We
locator
carry a
beacons?
spot with us. That's a really great question. I don't really know. Dan, you may have a better suggestion on this since you're on the board, but our spot beacon is really good. We've had a few issues of it not necessarily updating as frequently as we thought it would. So you'll see a huge jump in our map. But you know, like InReach, I believe has gotten really good where you can do like custom text messages as opposed to the pre-programmed ones. And you can also receive text messages back. It really kind of depends on which model and how much you want to spend on it.
Yeah, I think we would highly recommend the Garmin InReach for use in the backcountry if you need to get emergency notifications out. It does require a paid subscription service, I believe. I'm not sure on the details of it, but that and any of the other satellite communication devices that are out there are definitely worthwhile to have. As far as EPIRBs go, they seem to have gone by the wayside, I think. We haven't had any mountain locator beacons or anything like that on any missions in quite some time, I think, Tyler. But it's better than nothing.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
I had another question. So, what do you think are some of the most common reasons that, or things that led people to end up needing to be rescued? So, do you think it's that maybe they were not, there's a lack of preparedness, or maybe they got dehydrated, or I don't know.
Yeah, that's a Dan. Do you want to take this one, Dan?
No, go ahead, Tyler.
Okay. I wish we had a good answer on that because that could help us pre-plan, right? Like if it was dehydration, like, all right, we're going with electrolytes or whatever. It really depends. On these two particular mountains, most of the rescues we have done have really kind of stemmed from just being unlucky, being in the wrong spot at the wrong time. Whether it's a fall that happens or somebody gets hit by rock, you can't, there's a lot of things that when you're out climbing in the mountains, you can't really control, but you can do your best to mitigate it. So a lot of the things on these particular two mountains exclusively are really in the last 10 years have been mostly unfortunate circumstances and being unlucky. Some of the other kind of stuff that we do, some of it is lack of being prepared. People go out, like this weekend is going to be a fantastic example. They'll go out hiking in their jeans and their cotton t-shirts, and it's going to be cold and rainy. People start to get hypothermic. There are ways to mitigate that. You're still going to get colds and wets, even if you're wearing synthetics or whatever, quick drying things that might keep you warm. But you can mitigate how fast you get cold or ways that you can kind of keep yourself warm. You know, it's kind of all over the place. For a while, kind of before I joined, probably 15 years ago, our most common mission was about this time of the year when people go out mushroom hunting. They start walking around with their head down and they look up an hour later and like, I have no idea where I'm at. Those have kind of gone away because cell coverage has gotten so good. And GPS apps on phones have gotten so good as well. So people can figure out how to get back home or back to their car.
I also think that sometimes people are not prepared for if they end up staying longer in the wilderness than they initially planned. And they don't bring extra snacks with them, or like maybe a headlamp or, you know, something like that, or a emergency blanket if they need one. Something
Yeah,
like
definitely. I've fallen prey to that as well. Sometimes you go out and you're like, oh geez, I forgot to pack my lunch, or I forgot to pack a headlamp, and it happens for sure.
Yeah, we definitely recommend bringing all your 10 essentials, including extra food and water and shelter, navigation, and the rest of them. In every situation you go on, even if you're just planning a short day hike, it doesn't hurt to have all that equipment with you because you never know what could happen. You could come across someone with contusions and confusions on the trail who you have to stay with for an extended period of time while your another person in your party goes to communicate for help. Thanks again for that question, Malaya. Does anyone have any other questions? All right, thanks everyone for being here this evening. We're gonna wrap this up, and there'll be a recording available on the CMRU YouTube page, and we'll see if we can get it shared out to Valley Rock Gym as well. And again, if you're interested in joining CMRU and you're an experienced climber, just email our member at large at membership@cmru.org, and then refer to all our other sponsors of this webinar in Tyler's contact page here. Thanks, everyone.